All right, DOM calculator review. So Kyle was gracious enough to let me tear his code apart. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you for being brave. And let's take a look at it together. So let's run the code to see if it works. 1 + 6 equals, beautiful. Bravo, bravo, bravissimo. Times 9. Cool. So if I see, well, let's take a look, just kind of scan top to bottom, take a look at how Kyle did this. So declares all these up at the top. I like that. Declares an operator array. Interesting choice, but I dig it. Okay, so we've got nice, small, except for that one and that one, functions. Pretty straightforward. Failed format. I don't know if I like the name on that. You got some wild logic happening in here. Take a look at that in a sec. We'll find last index and find first index. Cool. So we're reading it off of the screen. Getting that. Okay. So this really isn't find first and last index. This is like finding the first and last character. All right. Evaluating the screen. Very well done on, oh, we're gonna have a good time with this. So it looks like Kyle was trying to avoid using eval and doing the calculations manually. Not bad. Failed format is this thing up here. We'll tear that apart in a sec. This is the click listener. Ah, interesting. Very interesting. So what Kyle did here is Kyle has one event listener for the entire buttons thing. And then he's looking at the thing that gets clicked, make sure that it's one of the spans. I'm guessing this checks to see if something came out goofy. If the button that was clicked, oh, this is clever. I haven't seen someone do this before. This works though. If the button that was clicked is my clear button, if the button that was clicked is the equals button, then we do this. We also need to have something where we're looking at the content of the button, because we can't do the math with that and that. We have to do something like that instead. Very interesting. Kyle, explain the failed format. What's happening here?
So basically it looks at the screen, and if the very first thing on the screen is an operator and you try to put something after it, it'll trigger an error. So it changes it to error. And then the or part is if the most recent character put on the screen is an operator and the next character put on the screen is an operator, it'll trigger an error. Excellent.
Very cool. So this is actually a pretty darn clever solution to it. Well done. Let's all right, so if I'm looking at this and trying to clean it up, I know that I've got some repetition between this one and this one. These look effectively the same with just one little tweak. That's like an instant hint to me that I should try to refactor out the common behavior. So I'm just gonna make a note to myself. Refactor these. Overall, I'm just looking for goofy shit. Kyle, do you use a linter?
No, I haven't. I don't know what that is.
Cool. Looks like you do. That's a good thing.
What's a linter?
Linter is something that helps you format your code. What's this failed format doing out here, just out in the open?
It's the only way I could get it to trigger properly. So when I had it inside, like whenever you would click, say it says 9 divided by, and you try to click divided by again, it would say error divided by. So it would still append that like symbol to the screen with also a pending error. So when I put it out there, it fixed it.
So like if I try to do that, like that?
Yeah, so that's the way I wanted it to work. But when it was inside, hit another operator. Oh, it's working there. Okay, I'm not sure then.
Because yeah, this stuff in JavaScript runs top to bottom. So the way that I declare these 4 variables, I declare this variable, I declare, not use, I declare this function, this function, this function, this function, and it really isn't until here that I take another action. So the way that failed format is written, it's saying like, all right, well, if any of these things are on the screen, then write error. That only runs the very first time we load the page. So that was my hunch that that doesn't actually do anything. All right, and then we're using event delegation for all of this. So I want you to think to yourself for a second. This is like a pretty clever use of event listeners. Just look at this for a little bit and see if you can sort through how it's working. I'm going to ask someone to explain it to me. I'll give you a sec to just read it for a little bit first. All right, Kelsey, be brave. See if you can tell me how this is working. Fuck.
Sure. Okay, so looks like he has an event listener added to what covers all of the buttons.
Correct.
And then he has an inline function that's that is controlling the handling based on what the target was of the click event.
Mm-hmm.
And
so, yep, keep going.
I'm a little confused on that, like the first if, I guess the second where if it first he's seeing if it includes an error. Or I guess the first one is if you click something that's not a button and it's a span, it takes you to trigger an error.
Yep. So let's take a look at just this part for a sec. So if whatever's on the screen includes the string error, and if the event being targeted is the clear button, then what? That clears the screen. So what happens if the thing that was being clicked is not the clear button?
Yeah, then it takes you into all of the other if
Ooh.
statements.
Does it? This is like one of the problems with nested ifs. It kind of looks that way, but look again.
Oh, nothing?
Nothing. That's like having that.
Yeah.
So my guess is that what Kyle was shooting for here is if we have error on the screen, we'd want to swallow that. We don't want you to be able to do anything else unless it's the clear button, because that's giving you a chance to start over again. Here's another way to rewrite that. Anytime you feel tempted to do something like that, where if this is true and this is true, don't do that as a nested if. Do that as an and. That'll do the exact same thing. If I try to do something illegal, I get that. Oops, I think that was the thing he was talking about. But, oops, that's supposed to be letting me do that. We'll figure that part out. But the general idea is that instead of if and then if, combine those into one line. There's a lot of good reasons to do that, but one of them is just readability. Now we don't have to worry what that other thing was. Questions about that? As a formatting thing, I wouldn't do your new cases on new lines. This is called OTB, or Ritchie and, fuck, I can't remember who the other one is. K and Kernighan and Ritchie. Syntax, or sorry, format. That also, and that, and that. One true brace is what a lot of devs will call that. Makes it a lot easier to read, because when I see this, I'm kind of expecting this if to be some kind of standalone thing, like the first one. If we go back a ways, like this was. When I see one of those all by itself like this, I'm expecting it to be a short circuit like that is. Whereas that makes it clear that they're all part of a chain. Cool. All right, so let's look for some other opportunities to improve this code.
Quick question, I guess, on that section. I forgot if you yourself mentioned it or I've just heard like Ben give me the skinny on your opinion about it. But would that be, would like this event listener be a good opportunity for like a switch statement? I've heard that you hate those, but I've heard that they're also like pretty good if there is like a lot of, like if it'd be a lot of if else's. I don't know.
Correct. I do hate switch statements. I hate long if else chains and nested ifs even more. And this is the lesson where we finally talk about that. So a switch would actually not do too much for us on this one. Can anybody tell me why? Because I am checking event.target.text content, event.target.text content, good so far. Just event.target, just event.target. They're different things. So unless like one of the terms in the like our thing is the same every time, can't really use a switch. Now on the other hand, every single one of these is looking at array index 2. That's an opportunity to turn this into a switch statement. So if this becomes switch array 2, now I can describe all of the rest of these like case plus, and then take that. And now I'm cleaning this up substantially. So next one's minus 1 was this one. This one is division. Multiplication. And then if you did have like an else, then what that is default. And then whatever the default behavior is. So identical, they do the exact same things. The switch statement is like generally a little bit easier to read. All right, so, there's probably some other opportunities for cleaning this up a little bit though. So another thing that jumps out to me, Kyle, what is array index 2?
It's the operator from the screen.
Okay. That's a lot easier to read. So think of variable names as an opportunity to label things. When I see array index 2, that's what it's referred to as a magic number. Why 2? Why not 3? Why not 0? The fuck is it? That gives us an opportunity to communicate our intent with that a little bit more clearly. Because remember, all this code, this isn't what the computer sees. The computer, all it understands is beeps and boops. This is for us. This is for you in the future. This is for the next developer. So that's why we want to grab those opportunities. Cool. Next thing that I see is it feels like, this feels repetitive to me. So we're kind of doing the same shit. And it's always with array 1 and array 3. So I'm going to say operand are for, let's say operands equals array 1 and array 3. Yeah. I consider doing operand 1 and operand 2. Fuck, actually, I do kind of like that better. Putting numbers in your variable names is like basically always the wrong call. I think it sort of works here though. What's tricky is that like those have official names, but it's different for every one of the operations. So like in shit, what are they called? terms for operands in subtraction. Minuend and subtrahend are the names of those things in subtraction. Multiplicand versus and multiplier. Dividend versus divisor. So they're a little bit different for each one. It's helpful to pick the right one. I think we kind of get the idea with that though. So I'm going to change that to operand 1. With all these. And I'll make this one operand 2. I also noticed that you use these. Anybody pick up on what those do? It's kind of cool, actually. You can do it with all of them, really. Or shit, just do it up here. It's even better.
Is that, since he's doing it, the text content, is that converting it from a number to a string?
Correct. Does the exact same thing as parseInt. It's just substantially fewer characters and reads a little bit faster. Ah, now I really get what's happening here. Nice. So now the next thing that I want to do is destroy this switch statement. So Ben was correct. I do not care for switch statements. And I gave an entire talk about it, in fact. If you would like to see it, it was called Programming Without Ifs. And the reason that I don't like ifs and switch statements and all of their cousins, cyclomatic complexity. So cyclomatic complexity is a very super fancy term for how many paths are there through the code. So if we look at this, it hits this line and it can go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different places. What's the 5th place?
Whatever your default would be.
Whatever the default would be. I don't have it on there, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So there are 5 different independent pathways to this code. Any one of them could error out. Any one of them could do something that I'm not expecting. So then I have to write 5 test cases for all of those. Also, this is in the else branch of something. So that's 5 times whatever other things I have up here. That's a lot of fucking test cases. So the magic trick here is in this case, there's 2. There's like a simple one and a complicated one. The complicated one is, let's see if I can find the slide for it. Dynamic dispatch. The other one is dictionary lookup. They're almost the same. Dynamic dispatch is like 10% more complicated. The idea is that instead of doing something like this, like if you were doing the division symbol and the X for these, but you needed to look these up, you could make a mapping. So you could say something like operators, and anytime you see X, that should map to that. Or you can do this with all of them. Plus is plus, minus is minus, and then that weird division symbol. So then, instead of having switch statements for those, anytime I wanted to get the correct actual operation for one of those things, I can do operators operator, and it will turn whatever I have as an operator into what it has to be in JavaScript. The cyclomatic complexity of that is 1. There's only one path through the code. Effectively, what I did is I turned like a bunch of logic, like that. So this is logic. This is data. Turning logic to data is how you reduce cyclomatic complexity. Now, pause. This is advanced black magic. This is like what the end of the rainbow looks like on JavaScript, and like kind of these sorts of programming challenges in general. Dynamic dispatch, cyclomatic complexity, but you guys are grown up now, and I think it's time you learned that there's more to life than ifs and switches. So the slightly more complicated one, why can't we do that with these ones? Why can't I just do that little lookup thing that I just did? Look what I had again. This. Beautiful. Not going to work for these though. Why?
Because that's looking for the value, not the key.
Close. You're in the neighborhood. Because that's a calculation, not a value. The operands are going to be different every time. I can't just look up the answer. I don't know the answer. I need to calculate the answer. So we use a very closely related technique called dynamic dispatch. And it works like this. We make an object. We take our cases for it, and we make them equal to functions. So we could do something like, like that. That syntax looks like super fucked up. And we can even make it more fucked up. Check that out. That works too. But all that is, I'll write it out longhand for minus. Same thing. Just really leaning into some of our newer syntax. Cool. Now I can say something like $screen.text content equals operations operator. Done. Cyclomatic complexity, 1. I turn all this logic into data. Ask me some questions about it.
Does it work?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I've done an awful lot of things without like actually checking anything. Let's see. Ooh, broke something. Return not in function. On line 10. Still have this quasi switch statement up here. Missing line 42.
Do you need a comma after the minus function?
I do. Yeah, it's also mad at me for doing this in an object with a fat arrow function and not wrapping that, which is fine. Still mad at me about this. Why are you so mad?
Is it because you have a comma at the end with nothing following it?
Nope.
We'll get angry over that. On line, what would that be, 47 after the multiplication?
I'll pair out through all the numbers. Nope, that's a trailing comma. It's totally allowed. Oh, I know why. I'm mixing and matching fat arrow and not fat arrow. I can't do, this is called a method shorthand, where you do the key of something and then immediately do the arguments for it. You can't do those with fat arrows. All right, should work now. 5 plus 5 equals, it's just turning the entire thing. Oh, I need to invoke it, duh. Operand 1, operand 2. 8 times 8. All right, let's debug it. Not a fat arrow. Not a fat arrow. 8 times 8. Ta-da!
So you either dedicate to the new way or you stick with old syntax. There's no in between.
Like, you just can't mix and match them. So like this method shorthand where I'm doing that, I can't do that with a fat arrow. What I could do is do that, and I'll bet it lets me fat arrow this way. Let's see. Let's see if plus still works. 8 plus 8. Yeah, that totally works.
It's so cool that you have like an object key and then arguments.
Yes. And like this is referential transparency. Looking this up, that evaluates to a function definition. I have this object, I pass in a totally valid key, and it's going to evaluate to some function. All right, well, I can invoke functions and I can pass things into them. And so that's exactly what I do over here. That's referential transparency. And like, it's terse. It requires you to like be able to read something like this, but frankly, it's a lot cleaner. Oops, put my minus wrong. Also makes things like that jump out a little bit more. Ask me some questions.
Can you go over again why there's the plus in front of the array 1 and array 3?
So since he got this out of a regex, those are strings. That's going to mean, let's say if I don't do that, it might handle this, but I kind of don't think it will. Let's try seeing what happens if we try to do some addition. Yep, that's what I thought. 8 plus 8 is 88.
Just adding two strings together instead of two numbers.
Right, it concatenates them. So when I do this, it forces it into being a number. It's exactly like that, but reads a lot quicker.
So it's just like JavaScript shorthand?
Correct. It's a hack. It's not supposed to work, but it does.
What's his regex evaluate to?
Ah, very nice. So that was the next thing I was going to do. What is this regex doing?
So it looks like it's checking for a number and then an operand and then another number.
Yep.
Any digit number or digit operand digit.
Yep. So likewise, I would give that a name. So I would say maybe operator surrounded by digits. Operator surrounded by numbers. And then, nope, come on, your time. Put it out here. And say, now we don't have to ask ourselves that question anymore. You should pretty much always do that with a regex, because regexes are fucking impossible to read. Also, that needs to be escaped. That's mad at me. Because if you know what it's supposed to be, you can kind of read it. Any digit, an arbitrary number of them, the exact same thing on the other side, and then the parentheses are like one of, and they're separated by pipes. So one of these, or one of these, or one of these, or one of these. I had to escape it because it's also how we terminate a regex. And then the parentheses around each of those are called capture groups. That's why we can access each part of the match independently. Array 0, FYI, would be the entire match.
Could you console log the array so we can see what it looks like?
Yeah, totally. That was the thing that matched. These are the capture groups.
And that comes from those parentheses around each one?
Correct.
Okay.
Regex is another kind of black magic thing. I imagine some of you got a taste of that today. But the regex O'Reilly book. Look how fucking thick that thing is. It's like, it's not one of these things that anybody I've ever met like gets. No one is fluent in regular expressions.
I like how it says pocket reference on it. That's a good one.
Regex by trial and error is how everybody kind of does it. And there's some really good slash and dots until a thing happens. So most people will go to like some regex checker. And you can put a test string in, like 8 plus 5. And we can take this regex and shove it. And what do you know? Capture groups and all. And then like, I can't fucking figure out how to do this. And you just play with this until it highlights the way that you want it to. That's how most people do it. Pretty good explanation though. Cool. Another way we can reduce the cyclomatic complexity of this here function. This entire thing is in an else condition. I don't like that. I also totally get that. Trying to like prevent, because if you try to do that, we're going to break some stuff, right? So we want to detect whether or not somebody is trying to divide by 0 and just error out before we try to actually run the calculation. So another way we could do that is just say, cool, set that, and then return. And now the rest of this doesn't need to be in that block. Ah, much better. This is called a guard clause. Print something. So it's right up top of the function. If there's something that could break the execution of the function, we detect it and we get the hell out of there.
So with that, if somebody tries to divide by 0, it's going to put the error screen or error content, and then it just shuts down.
Yep.
Until you change that condition.
Well, let's see what evaluate screen. Cool. So that's going to evaluate to false. We're not doing anything with it. We theoretically could at some point. If evaluate screen, then whatever. But yeah, no harm, no foul. And we got rid of a pretty nasty bit of indentation. Oh, here's another cool thing. Since this list of operations, these are pure functions. All right, well, if they're pure functions, they don't need to be in this function body. We can put them up here. We can put them in a different file. They don't depend on anything else being in the environment. Now, that's starting to slim up a little bit. This also feels like that could be its own function. So I want to get the, yeah, what if we had this? Because this isn't evaluating the screen, really. Like part of that problem, sort of, kind of, but we could put our own name to that. So we could say something like function get values on screen, or get values from screen. And we could also like clean that up a little bit if we pass in the screen, because then that becomes a pure function, so we're not depending on that only being in this file. What if I Move all of that into there. Now, I can't return more than one thing out of a function. I can do the next best thing, though. Hey, that's all right. And then over here, I can destructure that out and get something like operator, operand 1, operand 2 equals get values from screen. And that works because get values from screen invoked returns this object. All right, well, I can destructure objects. Referential transparency. And now, I don't need any of that. That's a pretty simple little function now. Also, if I had something else I needed to check on the values, see if they're above or below a certain thing or whatever, I can do that independently from writing something to the screen. Bonus.
The way you have that const written, is that just declaring 3 consts all at once, or is that actually declaring the object?
So this is destructuring. This is the same as const operator equals get values from screen dot operator. Except, and then like 3 times with each of those. So yeah, it's 3 consts, and I'm pulling them out of the object that I get back. Destructuring, that's called.
You called setting it up in objects like that. That was hash mapping. Is that what you said, or just mapping?
Yes, that's mapping. So this one that we had up. So this is dynamic dispatch because they're functions. If they were simple values, you're mapping one thing to another thing.
So it doesn't matter the way that you named those, as long as like the file structures are similar. Or the data structures, rather.
Yes, correct. And then like you can do this with just regular JavaScript, but we can get one more level of confidence in something like TypeScript or something where there's statically typed languages. We can even enforce before we even run the code that all 4 of these have the same shape. Because it doesn't help if one of these only takes or needs 3 operands or something like that, and we only give it 2 and then it explodes. Oh, that's not great. But if we have a static typing system, we can say, cool, operations can be any function that takes in exactly 2 arguments, both of which are numbers, and then returns a single number. That's what like a static typing system lets us do. More questions?
You might have mentioned it earlier, but is there a way to like reduce down that one really long if statement? I forgot where it was. I thought you had made mention of it before. I think it's like in the middle of the page.
This one right here is pretty gnarly.
Oh, I meant like it was one if statement, but it had like a lot of ors in it. Yeah, that the failed.
Oh, this one. So first, I want to be able to read it. This is so long. This is 144 characters long. Too much, man. So first, just for myself, I'm going to try to decompose this a little bit. Okay. So first thing that I'm looking for in this is an if statement. So we're expecting this entire thing to evaluate to true or false. Truthy or falsy at a minimum. It has, if I count these like Boolean operators in here, that tells me I have 3 things. So I'm doing something like false or false and true. I'm doing something like true or true and false. So each one of these individual things ends up evaluating to a single true or false. Okay? So knowing that, if I put a little bit of this back, okay, I can kind of follow that a little bit better. So part of the problem is like the naming on this. So I don't like either of these names that can't used own here. We're not finding the last index. We're not finding the first index. And especially given how we're using them, I kind of want to call these like first character, last character. I'll call that last character, and this one first character. Then this becomes first character. Or, you know, since it's a method, like get in front of it. Get first character, get last character. Okay. And because that if statement is so complicated, I sort of want to make some variables up here for this. So first character, watch how this cleans this up. This is a thing that like functional assholes like me are really bad at, and Ruby people in general are super good at, is like renaming this stuff up at the top. Screen content. Text. Okay, so just declaring those. God, now this is starting to read like a little story. So if the operator array includes the first character, so that would be like if the first character is an operator, or if the last character is an operator, and that's the only thing on the, and the operator is in the screen?
The and is saying if the next thing you press is also an operator.
Ah, gotcha. Then I don't think that is what it says, but point taken. Then do that. So like some little renaming things like that make the code a lot easier to follow and debug. Oh, it was event. I see. Event.target.text content. So this is supposed to be coming from an event. Where's the event coming from though?
It's in the listener, so it's basically the next thing that you click.
Uh-oh. But, so like in this one, how is it getting the event?
Yeah, you'd have to add it in.
We'd have to pass it in. And then we have to tell it that we're looking for it. Now that, last pressed, or last new character maybe? Yeah, new character. So if the first character is an operator, or the last character is an operator, and the newest character that I entered is an operator, that's generating error. That I can follow. One more low-hanging fruit thing. We have a bunch of things like this, especially if they're all just declared up at the top and they're all kind of the same thing, like they're all elements here. One of the refactors that I'll usually do, see if I can't just group those together. Something like that. And then all I have to change, like in all these places I'm using it, just put the dot in there. Come on, man. Don't make me look like an asshole in front of my friends. Right, clear button, same thing. Cool. No like performance difference or anything on that, but I'm a real miser when it comes to making statements. So especially like these kinds of equality or assignment statements. So if I can, and those all belong together. So if I can make them all kind of go together, I think that's nice. What else? More questions?
For the third bonus, to turn it into a text box that you can actually type in arithmetic, would you just do an input type of text and then get form data?
Ooh, there's a few ways we could do that. Yours would be, first of all, yours is the accessible way to do it, but for some reason, the first way that occurred to me was you listen on the document for people, for keystrokes. So like, that's something like document.add event listener key up. So now anytime somebody types on the page, we can log the event. So it's mad about something on line 57. Oh yeah, don't do that. That's a little bit different. All right, cool. So if I type on this page, oops. Oh, that's not gonna work on mine because I have a browser plugin that's like kind of doing that for me. Turn it off. All right. Yep. So every time I type, you can see it show up on the screen. So what I want is the key. That's still, they have turned Vimium back on. Hang on. Let me do my funny joke. It's still fucking, oh, it's because I refreshed. All right, refresh, turn off the plugin. There we go. So my first thought was to listen for that on the page and then just do like a regex match to see if it's a number. So we could do something like if event.key.match a digit, then log it. So that should only log numbers. Let's see if I got my regex foo right. So type, nothing. Oop, didn't do it on the numbers either. Event.key.match. Let me check. //\d. Yeah, should work. Oh, test is what I'm looking for. So nothing. Fuck. Ow. Nope. Nope. There we go. Found it. Test isn't it? Come on. JS string regex methods. Exec, it might just be exec. But that's a method of the regex. That'll work. So I do /d.exec event.key. Let's see if that'll do it. Okay, so I got numbers coming back, but if I do letters, nothing. So then I could also like, or if it's a number, or if it's one of the operators, and make it show up on the screen. So I could do it that way. I think it's definitely more accessible to make this an input box, and well, we can do some of the same kinds of things to constrain what people are allowed to type in. It's better to do that than let people type fart in there and then break your calculator. Like if F isn't an allowed character in the input field, it's better user experience to just not put it in there. Because there's even like non-dumb reasons that somebody would do that. They just fat-fingered something. You want to help your user out as much as possible. So I would still probably do something kind of like this to constrain it. You can also do things like if somebody has typed in an operator and the last character was an operator, then cool, just replace it. That's what like a lot of calculators will do. And then as far as like how you would process it, then your equals button would be something like so the entire calculator is a form, and then I do equals button, add event listener, click, and then I can just say something like calculator form dot submit. And then on the calculator form, or I could have that be a submit button or something like that. That might even make more sense. Then I could also have like a calculator form submit listener, and then that becomes evaluate screener or something like that. Or if you're going to do that, that's just that. Good question. What else?
How close is this to what we got to do for next week? Code challenge.
Oh, 0. So the mod 3 code challenge is way closer to the mod 2 code challenge. You still might struggle with it a little bit, but like it's not hard like the mod 2 code challenge was. Other questions?
Is now like a good time to start requesting classes on like kind of the that you can do in JavaScript?
Yes. You cut out for a second there, but yes.
Okay.
This is about the right time. Mod 3 is where a lot of like just the programming exploration kind of stuff starts happening. So some people start getting curious about Node or that kind of stuff. Totally appropriate. The now we're like plenty of people have crashed on the rocks before. Is you still have stuff you have to do. So like you should still be real comfortable with fetch. You should be super comfortable with events. This is like the bulk of like this stuff's on the code challenge and just in your life. Those two things you need to be fucking solid on. Auth isn't on the code challenge. This like heady stuff, also not really on the code challenge. It's really just these two things. But you should start learning some FP stuff. You should start learning some OOP stuff. You should start being able to wrestle these things that you can do now. You should start being able to wrestle that stuff into words. You are going to need to do auth before the end of the program. So like you should learn how to do that too. But really, these are the only things that are on that code challenge. Other questions?
I guess as far as the projects for Mod 3 goes, they're going to be pretty similar to Mod 2, just with more tools in our belt.
Make a web app. Spoiler alert, that's also the project for Mod 4. Yeah, use the new things you can do, make another web app.
What's the difference between the web pages that or web apps that we've made and a single page?
So in a single page app, a lot of people mistakenly infer this to mean like there's only one page in the app. Not true. There's only one HTML page. But instead of loading up a new HTML page when you go somewhere else, you wipe the DOM and put new stuff in the DOM. That's what makes it feel like an app. Because like if I click around on links and stuff, it feels like I clicked a link on a browser. Versus like if I click around my email or something like that, it doesn't feel like I went to a new web page. It just loads. That's because like swapping stuff in and out of the DOM is very quick. Doing an HTTP request and like re-rendering everything from scratch is very slow. And so single page app is just reimagining like these, instead of like each one of them being a completely new document you're requesting, we're just doing DOM manipulation to make it look like that.
Is that a part of responsive design? You're going
Not really. You can have responsive stuff that isn't single page apps. They're independent concepts. Responsive design is that like this page is not responsive. So if I turn on the mobile emulator, it fucking falls apart. Versus if you go to my personal site and do the same thing, works pretty good. That's responsive. But conversely, this is not a single page app. If I click on this link, it goes to a new page. It has that like brief pause, makes an HTTP request, loads up an entire new URL, everything. Versus the Flatiron site, this is a single page app. So when you're clicking around on these, see how it doesn't feel like I loaded up a new page? You don't have the URL change. You can still bookmark it and stuff. Those are completely different templates. There's a hierarchy. All it's doing is yanking the old list out of the DOM and putting the new list in.
Same with like the videos tab.
Yeah, when I go to the videos page, that's also, it's not reloading any of the HTML. It's been one index.html page the entire time. Oh, it's mad at me. That video page is getting too long. Ahmed and I tried to work on it a little bit yesterday, but I couldn't get the fucking site to load on my computer anymore. Uh-oh. But yeah, this, like all this stuff, they're just, see if it'll let me do it now faster. Yeah, it does not like how many videos we have on the site now. So, yeah, and the way that we get new content like those videos is these fetch requests. That's where all this starts coming together. I can make those fetch requests whenever. It doesn't have to be a page load. It can be because I did a navigation, which is just a made-up React concept or Vue concept or whatever. This is a Vue app, by the way. Yeah, all these things, they're not new pages, but they are different files. They're different components. Ultimately, all it's doing is ripping stuff out of the DOM and putting it back in, though.
Can we request classes on responsive design right now?
Totally.
Okay.
I have some existing stuff. We have some videos for that as well. What else? Awesome. Hopefully this was fun. Thank you so much to Kyle for letting us rip apart your code a little bit. Very brave of you. And I'll see you guys in half an hour. Bye.
Thanks, Kyle's.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks, Kyle.